In her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer says, when we talk about climate change, there's often a hidden resignation, like, of course we harmed the earth. And when we talk about acting on it, there's also an undercurrent, that it will require a level of sacrifice that's worth it, but just barely. What if, instead, the story we tell about climate change is that it is an opportunity, one for humans to repair our relationship with the earth and re-envision our societies in ways that are not just in keeping with our ecosystems, but also make our lives better. Robin Wall Kimmerer is a mother, scientist, professor, and enrolled member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation. I heard about her work through sermons here at church, and I became extremely grateful for it when I taught the science of biodiversity, ecosystems, and climate change to 6th grade students a few years ago. I have been a teacher for about 20 years, but I had never taught science before fall 2020, when science class was on Zoom, and the kids I taught were collectively traumatized by a global pandemic, isolated in their bedrooms, cameras largely off, communicating with me primarily by chat emoji. So 2 questions centered me as I prepared to teach that unusual year. How could I get my students to do science at home, since we wouldn't have access to lab equipment at school? And how could I teach about the urgent need to protect biodiversity in a way that didn't compound trauma? In a New York Times article, Dr. Kimmerer said, so much of what we think about in environmentalism is finger-wagging and doom and gloom. But when you look at those examples where people are taking things into their hands, they're joyful. That's healing. Not only for land, but for our culture as well. It feels good. Dr. Kimmerer says, our attention has been hijacked by our economy, by marketers. What if we were paying attention to the natural world? She goes on to say, I've often had this fantasy that we should have Fox News, by which I mean news about foxes. What if we had storytelling mechanisms that said it is important that you know about the well-being of the wildlife in your neighborhood, that that's newsworthy? If we can reclaim our attention and pay attention to things that really matter, there a revolution starts. Nature journaling is a method people use to pay attention to other species by routinely making observations and scientific drawings in the natural world. And it was the best way I could do science with my students in the fall of 2020. Inspired by the curriculum of John Muir Laws, my students and I began to notice our own backyards or apartment windows. We recorded the temperature, cloud cover, and precipitation. We described the wind. Then we each chose one organism to draw as scientifically as possible for about 20 minutes, writing our observations, questions, and connections. The students took digital photos of their entries so I could share them in our Zoom meetings. Kids' cameras were still largely off in those Zoom classes, but you should have seen the smiley face emojis flying in the chat as they celebrated each other's drawings. Some students even began meeting up with each other to work on nature journals together in real life at local parks. And others joined me, masks on and socially distanced, at lunchtime in the gardens behind our school. Oh, the delight we experienced when a slug made its way onto a can of sparkling water, or a ladybug started crawling on a jacket sleeve. In our unit reflection, students noted that their drawing ability improved. They used more scientific vocabulary in later entries, and they noticed more. They wrote, I learned to stop and look and think. I noticed how important the small things are and not just the big things. I learned how to connect with nature. In fall 2020, when anxiety swirled around and within us, nature journaling brought us calm joy. The relationship we were able to build with our own ecosystem also offered us a strong foundation to begin the work of understanding why biodiversity needs protecting. Robin Wall Kimmerer wrote in Braiding Sweetgrass, "We're not in control. What we are in control of is our relationship with the earth. It is the most authentic facet of restoration. Here is where our most challenging and rewarding work lies, in restoring a relationship of respect, responsibility, and reciprocity, and love." Reciprocity means both parties give something and both receive. Restoring our love of the earth and feeling the earth nurture us is reciprocal. In a capitalist culture, we humans often categorize vulnerable parts of life as things we need to take care of or fix. And then they become just another job or just another burden. When we view the earth as only a thing that needs saving, rather than a life force that also saves us, we objectify all other life. Today, Reverend Kimberly told us the story of Emil, who built a relationship with a field and understood that no one should own it, not even him. I'd like to think we all have our own unique ways of restoring our relationships with the earth, whether through gardening, skipping stones in Lake Michigan, bird watching, even if just outside a window. Based on our different bodies, lived experiences, and histories, we all have varying interests and abilities. Yet we all also experience varying barriers in accessing joyful connections with nature. Many of those barriers deeply ingrained in the unjust human systems we inherited along with the climate crisis. Connecting with nature is not a frivolous indulgence and should not be a privilege enjoyed only by the few. When we can access it, when we can actively build a relationship with the earth, we are able to begin resisting the oppressive human-centric message that we are not enough. There, a revolution starts. Spending time with nature can quell our anxiety enough to help us consider what is actually possible for us to do, rather than being caught in the overwhelm of our minds. A scientist who cuts through the overwhelm and emphasizes working toward climate solutions is Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson. A marine biologist, policy expert, Brooklyn native, Dr. Johnson is co-founder of the climate initiative, the All We Can Save Project. In a January 2022 article she co-wrote with filmmaker Adam McKay, published in The Guardian, Dr. Johnson wrote about moments like the one Leah mentioned today. When Leah and her friends weren't sure what action would help with the climate crisis, other than reposting a TikTok story. I'm sure many of us, even those of us well beyond Gen Z, can relate to Leah's story, even if we're not on social media. Dr. Johnson says, maybe some film or GIF or TikTok has jostled you to think seriously about what you can do, specifically you. Well, here's one way to answer that question. Think of a Venn diagram, okay, with 3 overlapping circles. In a Venn diagram, characteristics of each category are written inside each circle, and you find shared characteristics that fit in all the categories where the circles overlap. And this overlap can be called the epicenter. Can you picture it? She says, in the first circle, put what you're good at. In the second, put what part of the climate challenge you want to work on, and in the third, put what brings you joy. What for you isn't work because you love it so much? And then find your way to that epicenter of the climate action Venn diagram for as many minutes of your life as you can. An example of someone who lives in the epicenter of her climate action Venn diagram walked into my classroom in the fall of 2021 as a sixth grader I'll call Alice. Alice was part of my class when we were back at school in person together all day for the first time since these kids were in fourth grade. Masks still firmly on, desks as far apart as possible. Yet even under her mask, Alice's kindness was bright enough to bring connection. Once she came in with handmade friendship bracelets for everyone in the class, including me. Before winter break, she gave us all gifts of pencil holders she made out of recycled materials. Mine, constructed with intricately woven plastic bags, still sits cheerfully on my desk at home. I remember the week Alice carried a biography of Greta Thunberg everywhere she went. Afterwards, she offered to let me borrow the book and asked if she could hang up a Greta quote in our classroom. It said, "Instead of looking for hope, look for action. Then and only then hope will come." Alice was a person of action. In addition to being an artist and maker, she gardened and composted at home. She dreamed of bringing a composting program to our elementary school cafeteria. Starting in December, Alice spent months researching other school composting programs, contacted Compost Crusader, created a persuasive slide presentation for our principal, enlisted students to help weigh the amount of food waste from all school lunches for an entire stinky week to measure how much compost we might create. And then just as momentum was building, the school year ended. It was time for Alice to move on to middle school. Although she, as one individual, had a dream, and although she acted on it, Alice couldn't do it alone. She needed a community of like-minded people. This need for community is why Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson and her co-editor, Dr. Catherine Wilkinson, entitled their anthology of climate solutions, "All We Can Save." In the last essay of the book, they unpack the title by writing, "So what can I do?" It's an increasingly prevalent question, which is a very good thing. But the answers offered are often trite, consumerist, and incomplete. And often the question should be, what can we do? How can we depart this perilous path? These are questions to live into every day for the rest of our lives. If Alice filled out that Venn diagram, she would have more things to say than fit in each of the three circles. Luckily, as a seventh grader this year, she found community. The part of the climate solution she wanted to work on was creating a compost program at school. Now Alice has joined the environmental club at her middle school, where she and friends work on a hydroponics project, run a composting program for all middle school lunches, and are collaborating to bring composting to the entire school district's cafeterias. Alice also has a passion for art making. Last year, she started taking classes at Madame Chino, where local artist Vanessa Andrew teaches people how to sew beautiful clothes and products from recycled fabrics as a way to counteract consumer waste and resist the harmful effects of fast fashion on the environment. Not only is Alice living true to her climate action epicenter, she found other people who can strengthen the work she started on her own. I have no doubt she is strengthening their work too. That brings me to us, here at First Church. I opened with Robin Wall Kimmerer's invitation for us to consider our sacred work for climate solutions not as a sacrifice, but as an opportunity to make our lives better. Our first invitation was to repair our relationships with the earth, to heal ourselves and begin to heal our planet by slowing down and paying attention to the natural world in whatever ways nurture and humble us. Now it's time for the second invitation Dr. Kimmerer suggests, re-envisioning our society. First, working for climate justice means continuing our work for racial justice. In an op-ed written for the Washington Post entitled, "I'm a Black Climate Expert, Racism Derails Our Efforts to Save the Planet," Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson emphasizes how the racial inequality crisis is intertwined with the climate crisis and says if we don't work on both, we will succeed at neither. Our work to become actively anti-racist is part of re-envisioning a society where everyone can access a deep sense of belonging in natural spaces, where everyone has the energy to work toward climate solutions rather than expending the bulk of one's strength trying to survive or continually justifying one's existence, where ecosystems and cultures are not destroyed for corporate gain or protected only for enjoyment by the privileged few. Another way of re-envisioning our society is by listening to young people. You heard about Alice, a 12-year-old who changed my life. We asked Leah, a 15-year-old member of our youth group, to help lead our service today. And I just found out this morning that Leah also started a Take a Hike club at her school, where over 20 people gathered yesterday to help clean up the Milwaukee River. If you have young people, yes. If you have young people in your life, connect with them about climate change. We cannot protect them from harsh truths by avoiding opportunities for real conversation, but we can be vulnerable with young people, get ideas from them, step up to support them, and help them discover their own power. Our church also just so happens to be called the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee, and we are not alone here in our society, at church or in Milwaukee. Milwaukee has many groups of like-minded people working together for climate justice, and right here, rooted in our church, our Earth Justice Ministry offers ways for us to build community for climate solutions. This morning, the Earth Justice Ministry is hosting a table at coffee hour where you can start your own climate action Venn diagram and sign up to receive beautiful pollinator-friendly plants for your garden from the Arbor Day Foundation at major discounts. The Earth Justice Ministry has many joyful ideas for all types of people who want to help with the climate challenge. And those of you on YouTube, you're part of us too, so please just check out the Earth Justice Ministry on our website. I'll close with words from Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, who says, "Consider what good work is unfolding around us, what invitations we may have already received, and what gifts we might have to offer or to offer more deeply. From personal acts to professional prowess to political participation, our layers of agency are more profound than we may realize. Enough of what we cannot achieve. Can is the drumbeat of those who refuse to give in to destruction, who rise again and again with life force. Whether we are 12 or 15 years old, 44 or 84, working for climate solutions is the work of our lifetimes. May we joyfully show up for each other and the earth. May we nurture and be nurtured, today and always. May it be so."